Also, are you serious?
What?
Do not read this.
Yeah, don't read that. For the love of God, don't read that. Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 349. I am one of your hosts, Bryan Prilliman, and I am joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello, hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. Hey, so this is our FFS release notes episode.
What an unfortunate
FFS?
code name.
FFS, yes, absolutely.
FFS as in secret, Final Fantasy Secret, Final Fantasy Set, Final Fantasy. What does the S stand for?
It's not the sake. It's
For Pete's,
Yes.
for Pete's sake? FF Pete's sake? It should be FFPS
Yep.
then.
Yep. Nope. This is we're gonna go through this set as meticulously as an 11-hour finals of a CEDH game.
Already the train has derailed. We are never going to get to the station. It is terrible.
Yeah,
There's a
this-
train somewhere in here that needs suplexing.
Right. This set is exhausting.
A little bit.
There's a lot
It is
to
a little bit exhausting. All right.
to it.
So let's actually, before we get started, have
Yeah.
any of you actually played the Final Fantasy games? Are any of you fans?
I have literally zero experience with anything Final Fantasy other than seeing Cloud holding a really big sword, which looks kind of cool.
And
I've
practically large sword. Yeah.
I have somewhere around 20 to 25 hours in on Final Fantasy VII, which I purchased in the last 3 months, and I got to a mini game that I could not beat because it was some stupid rhythm thing, and it just would not let me advance. And I was like, I'm going to put this aside for a moment and go play Cult of the Lamb, and I haven't been back to it yet, but I'll go back to it eventually. I'll play it through.
Okay.
It's cute. It's good. It's got good story. It's very emo. It's very 90s. Yeah. Yeah. It's just totally emo.
I played some of the early NES versions of Final Fantasy,
Yeah.
rented the games from the local grocery store,
Yep.
and then you know the woe of having to return it for a little bit and then renting it again and finding someone erased your game.
Yeah.
When you
Well,
rent
you only
it
get
back.
it for like 7 days anyway, so you have to beat it in that time.
Whoa, 7 days! You got 7-day rental money? Shoo. Long weekend at the best.
I'd forget to return it, hold on to it for a couple more days.
Played,
but yeah, I know. what you're
Played
talking
7. It was my first PlayStation game. Played 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2. Tried to play 12, and then it was just like it was too much like programming at work, and so hard pass and nonsense. So I know of some of it. I like a good amount of it, and then the rest of it is just I'm absolutely clueless. But where should we begin? At the beginning? All right. New mechanics. What's the big splashy new mechanic for this set?
So if you like Saga lands, like me and all my fellow Amulet players do, you might love a Saga creature.
Wait, you might?
I think you will.
I think
I
that
don't
it's
know.
like if you liked Saga Lands, you're gonna love Saga Lands 2.
I don't presume. Let
Saga
everybody
Boogaloo.
enjoy what they like.
Okay.
So, Final Fantasy introduces new cards that are both creatures and enchantment sagas. So, not just enchantment creatures. Now we're going full out enchantment creature sagas to represent the various summoned creatures in the games. I have no idea what they're talking about there, but hey, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. This looks kind of cool. Let's see what these are about.
So can I explain for our
Please.
listeners? I'm going to explain what a summon is based on my few video games. So, turn-based strategy, you have like a menu option that's like do an attack, use an item, cast a spell. Okay. You will unlock and you can earn various summons, which the summon spells are powerful, typically single summon. They just come in and like a Kryn or an Efreet or a big dragon will just come in and like smack down the bad guy and then go away. And then you have to like build up again to get to resummon.
Oh, so perfectly flavorful with sagas. They show up for a little bit, do a thing, smack down your opponent, and then leave.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, it's just like, what is it, that panda, eats, shoots, and leaves.
So, our example here is Summon Ixion for 2 and a white, and it has 3 chapter abilities on it. First one is Arrow Spark. Exile target creature an opponent controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. And 2 and 3 say, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. You gain 2 life. This is an enchantment creature, saga unicorn, with first strike and 3 power and 3 toughness.
That card's not pushed at all. Wow.
No, that's absurd. I love this. Okay, yeah, it fits the flavor. Summon Ixion, beat down your opponent, and then leave. Got it. So, physically, saga creatures have 2 text boxes. In the underlying rules, though, it's really just 1 text box that's formatted as though it had 2, because you have the saga text box that kind of goes down the left side of the card, and then you have your normal rules text box on the bottom that give us abilities like first strike, etc. Really, it's all just 1 text box. You just look at it that way because that's how our magic gorilla brains have learned to process cards. The chapter abilities are above the type line, and the other abilities are below the type line. And while the chapter abilities care about lore counters, the text in the bottom text box doesn't really care about any of that. And for the most part, sagas work just like previous sagas. So as a saga enters, it gets a lore counter, and you get the first chapter ability, which is a triggered ability for whenever you put a lore counter on.
Yeah. Putting the lore counter on is not a triggered ability, though.
Correct. The lore counter is a replacement effect when it enters the battlefield and a turn-based action for each turn moving forward. As your first main phase begins, you put another lore counter on the saga. It gets the next chapter ability. Again, that adding the counter is not a trigger. It's a turn-based action. But the putting the counter on the saga results in a trigger being added to the stack because your lore counters have gone up. You can respond to that triggered ability, but you cannot respond to upping the lore counters. That just happens. If multiple chapter abilities are to be added to the stack at the same time, like let's say you have an effect that doubles the number of counters something gets whenever you would put one on, the controller of that saga determines the order in which those triggers go on the stack. Removing a lore counter will not cause a previous chapter ability to trigger. In order to get the triggers, a counter has to be added, not taken away or get down to this number of counters. It's just specifically when you add a lore counter that gets you to the number associated with that chapter. If a saga has lore counters on it equal to or more than its maximum chapter ability, its controller sacrifices it as soon as its last trigger leaves the stack. Now, here's something really exciting. So I'm torn. On one side, I am super excited about this. As an Amulet Titan player, I love Urza Sagas. I'm so excited about this rules change. On the other hand, we might have to redo a YouTube video or 2. However, they are changing the way sagas work, specifically when they have no chapter abilities. So previously we've talked about how if Urza's Saga, which is a land enchantment saga, if that were to be under a blood moon, that would remove all the abilities from the Urza Saga, including its chapter abilities. And since it's a saga and had no chapter abilities, the game would go, oh, it's got more lore counters on it than the highest number of chapter abilities, which is 0. So sacrifice it. Not so anymore.
Oh,
now,
no.
no.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Stop.
Oh yes. Now the rules are changing so that if a saga loses its chapter abilities, probably because it's a saga creature that lost all abilities, like a Turn to Frog or Tishana's Tidebinder, for example, then it will not be sacrificed for having more lore counters than the maximum chapter ability on it. Additionally, if the saga has no chapter abilities when it comes time to do the whole turn-based action of adding a lore counter, you're not going to add a lore counter. So essentially, if a saga creature loses all abilities, the whole saga part of the creature is just on pause until it regains its abilities. It loses its saga-ness, its saga energy.
Its subtype is still saga. It is still an enchantment saga, but it's not sacrificed, and it's not going to get new lore counters on it. Basically, I'm thinking that they were like, oh man, we've got all these saga creatures, and people can harsh my mellow if they cause my saga creature to lose all its abilities, or if they're able to like. And then so they said, okay, well we just won't let that be a kill spell anymore. And then they were like, oh, but then does it still tick up? And what happens if it ticks up a lot, and then the ability goes away, or the dress down or whatever, or the tidebinder gets killed or whatever, and the abilities come back and it's been ticking up, and then suddenly it's gonna die and I don't have any of my cool stuff. So they basically just change the rules so you can be greedy.
Yep. In fact, this new rules change actually means that there's a new interaction between Urza Saga and Blood Moon that definitely doesn't feel that intuitive, but let's cover it really quickly here. So, in the past, when you cast a Blood Moon, you would just lose your Urza Saga because of the rule that is currently changing. It had a higher number of lore counts on it than its higher chapter ability. Since that ability is now going away, your Urza Saga is going to stay on the battlefield. Now, what does that mean for how that object is going to look after Blood Moon enters play? So let's walk through the layers for it. In the type changing layer, which is layer 4, we're going to apply the subtype of mountain to this land. Now, when you apply the subtype of mountain, that removes any of the rules text that was originally printed on the card and replaces it with tap, add red. But from there, in layer 6 under abilities, what we have is the resolution of an ability or two, depending on where your Urza Saga was before Blood Moon entered, that says either for the first chapter ability, tap to add a colorless, or the second ability would say pay 2 and tap to create a 0/0 construct artifact creature whose power and toughness is defined by how many artifacts you control. Now, because Blood Moon has already applied in layer 4, and then we're going to apply abilities being granted in layer 6, this results in an Urza Saga land that has the abilities tap to add red, tap to add colorless if the first chapter ability of Urza Saga resolved, and if the second chapter ability resolved as well, it'll also have the ability pay to tap and create a colorless construct. That won't go away. You just now have a more powered up mountain, and it's really weird, but it works because of the layer system. We remove the rules text in the rules box in layer 4 when we apply the subtype of mountain, but from there, we add abilities in layer 6 that have already been granted by a previously resolving effect, which ends up with a mountain that has a few more abilities than just tap for red mana. Very, very exciting if you like to play with Urza Saga.
I am not going back through and referencing every time that we talked about Blood Moon and Urza Saga. I'm just not. It's not my job.
It's been a fair amount. I can't shut up about it.
Yeah. Okay. So what is my job, though, is talking about job select. Hey, look at that. A segue. What we have here is a new feature on equipments. So let's take a look first at an equipment with job select, and then we'll talk about it. We have Dragoon's Lance as the example. It's 1 in a white. It is an artifact equipment. It has job select. We'll talk about that in a second again. And it has equipped creature gets +1/+0 and is a knight in addition to its other types. During your turn, equipped creature has flying. And something about Gaybolg equip 4. I don't get that part, but that's okay. In some Final Fantasy games, you can have a character change their job's roles, apparently. You know, you level up, you change your role, you go from being a mercenary to being a crime lord, what have you. I don't know if that actually happens in Final Fantasy, but that's kind of
basically
the idea.
if I recall correctly, it's been a really long time. You essentially have your jobs and outfits are very closely tied to each other. So
okay.
you change your job and you change your outfit at the same time.
Well, that would
think one
make
of the
sense
games even
because
called
I
the-
wouldn't want to
yeah.
be a monk wearing a thief's gear. I mean,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Right. So job select artifacts are meant to mimic that aspect of this of Final Fantasy, and job functions just like living weapon or for Mirrodin, which we just had a set a little while ago with that, where it puts a token onto the battlefield and then attaches the equipment to it. In this case, for job select, what it's doing is and for this card, I don't know if it's doing it all the time. I think it is, though. It's creating a 1/1 colorless hero and then attaching Dragoon's Lance to it, which will make it a 1/1 hero knight.
A 2/1.
A 2/1, right. But the game will see it come in as a 1/1 colorless hero because it doesn't actually become the 2/1 until after the equipment is attached to it. It's fully resolved.
Yeah, the important thing is the creature the equipment enters the battlefield, the token is created,
Yes.
and then the equipment is attached.
Right. Other than that, it's just normal equipment with something that says Gay Bulg equipped for. What is that? What is that at the bottom of the card? GAEBOLG
Gay
equipped
Bulg.
for. Yeah.
It's okay. So they've got
Is this a Final Fantasy thing and I just don't know what it is?
probably.
It must
So
be.
they've done what they do with a lot of these universes beyond, where they've just put like flavor words next to abilities that I guess if you know the game it makes a lot of sense, and if you don't know the game it's like, what the hell is this nonsense?
So this card is from Final Fantasy 14. So I need to go purchase Final Fantasy 14, download it onto my Steam Deck, and play it.
That's
and
what they hope.
And then we can go back and I can explain that whole thing, in a future episode 9 years from now, when I get the chance to play it. Yeah.
Or we could just ask, and then CJ will tell us in 6 months when he listens to this episode.
Keep an eye on our Discord.
There's always that. There's always that would actually probably be faster than me getting to it that way.
Oh. All right. Next up, we're going to be talking about tiered spells. So in the Final Fantasy game, you learn a spell, and then you learn a more powerful version of the spell, and then you learn a really powerful version, maybe the most powerful version. And they have replicated that on modal cards in the set. So let's talk about Restoration Magic. It's for a single white. It is an instant, and it is tiered. Now this spell is going to have 3 modes, and each mode has an additional cost associated with it. And what tiered means is you have to choose one additional cost. Okay, so if you want to think of it as spree spells from Thunder Junction, where you must choose one and only one additional cost, you're right there. Okay, so Restoration Magic for 1 and a white, it's tiered. You cast Cure, which the additional cost is 0. Target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. The next mode, Cura, is 1. An additional cost of 1. Target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You gain 3 life. Okay. Then we have Curaga, which is 3 and a white. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You gain 6 life. Okay, so it's the first mode targets, the second mode targets and you gain life, the third mode doesn't target, everything gets hexproof and indestructible and you gain 6 life. Cool. Just keep in mind for this, the mana value of a tiered spell is only what's in the top corner. It does not consider any of the additional costs. And if you somehow are allowed to play a tiered spell without paying its mana cost, that doesn't mean you get whatever mode you want for free. It means that you still have to choose one of the modes, and you still have to pay the associated additional cost with that mode.
Seems fair.
Seems fine.
Yeah. Another exciting part of Final Fantasy, or so I'm told by those who've played it, is all of the incredible locations that you get to travel to, including different towns, which is the next mechanic. Towns are a new land subtype. And towns are kind of like gates. Being a town doesn't really mean anything on the land itself, except for any other cards that might reference a town card. That's about it. So, for example, we have here Barren Airship Kingdom. This is a land town. This land enters tapped and can tap for either blue or red mana, and shows probably going to be some of the more beautiful art that's in the set. Is going to be all these cityscapes and landscapes that you see on these town cards, in my opinion, but to each their own.
We also have a few returning mechanics. Coming back to this set is Landfall, and that's just an ability word. It doesn't actually have any rules, meaning beyond linking similar stuff together. In this case, it's looking for a trigger that happens when a land enters the battlefield under your control. Flashback is back. That lets you pay an alternate cost in order to cast a spell from your graveyard. You still have to meet regular timing requirements to cast the spell, so sorceries need to be cast at sorcery speed. And a spell cast with flashback will exile itself anytime it tries to go anywhere other than exile. It's part of the charm of being able to cast that spell a second time from your graveyard. You only get to do that once. You don't get to, do it over and over and over again.
And you say flashback is back, but really, flashback never left. It's like one of the most prevalent non-evergreen mechanics in the whole game.
Yeah, I think we need to expand the evergreen keyword library. I've been on that train for a little while. Maybe we'll get to suplex it one day.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, they've expanded that. The whole concept of that is that, these mechanics that work really well and can be inserted in are used, and you see one or two instances in every set, and now that's happening again and again and again. So yeah, don't call it a comeback.
Like Storm.
Oh! I have the best Storm story. Somebody remind me at the end, and I'll tell it. It's really a lot of fun. Anyway, transforming double face cards are also back. And for this, we have a Cecil Dark Knight and Cecil Redeemed Paladin. Cecil Dark Knight is the front face. It costs 1 black for a 2/3 legendary creature human knight that has Death Touch and the ability Darkness. Whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Then if your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, you untap Cecil and transform it. And on the flip side, he's this happy little paladin, a legendary creature human knight that's a 4/4 and has lifelink and protect. Whenever Cecil attacks, other attacking creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So as a reminder, transforming double face cards are always just their front face in all zones other than the battlefield. So if they're in the graveyard or exile or in their library, it's just the front face. Sometimes also the stack. Transformed double face cards will always enter the battlefield front face up by default, unless a spell or ability explicitly states otherwise. If you are told to put a card on the battlefield transformed, and it's not a transforming double face card, then it will stay in the previous zone and does not enter the battlefield. It doesn't go on the stack, it doesn't do anything, it just stays where it was. If you create a token that's a copy of a transforming double face card, then the token will also be double-sided, which is pretty cool. If you have a token that's a transforming double face card and you're instructed to exile it, it just goes poof. Gone.
If you have a token that was created as a copy of a transforming double face card.
Great. Makes sense.
There's a lot of cards in this set that tell you there's some cards in this set that just tell you to transform, and there's some cards that tell you to exile and then transform, and then return it transformed.
And I think this list here also includes that I'm supposed to mention that cards that are back. We have meld cards, we have adventurer cards, and we have kicker cards all coming back.
Yep.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And there's only one pair of meld cards. You can go back and listen to our other episode. Look, this set's really long. And while meld cards are interesting from a rule standpoint, sometimes you just gotta move on. All right, adventure cards, we've seen those recently, and kicker is just everything's kicker. We know that. So on to the specific card notes. Okay, Oh boy. We'll start off with Aerith Gainsborough. I used to live when I lived in Central Virginia, just over the other side of the mountain was Gainsborough. It was Waynesboro. Anyway, Aerith Gainsborough is 2 and a white for a legendary creature, human cleric, 2/2 with lifelink. It says whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Aerith Gainsborough, and when Aerith Gainsborough dies, put X +1/+1 counters on each legendary creature you control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Aerith Gainsborough. How many times can Aerith Gainsborough be on one card? Jeez. All right, I guess the answer is 3. But anyway, so the second ability, the whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Aerith Gainsborough. That triggers just once for each life-gaining event. Regardless of if you gain 1 life or 3 life, you get just 1 counter. Okay? I am going to make a note, though, that whenever you gain life is actually not exactly what that means. That's just shorthand for whenever a source causes a player to gain life. This will allow the trigger, that ability to happen multiple times when you attack with multiple creatures with lifelink. Okay, without this special rule, like if I attacked with 4 lifelink creatures, okay, I said 4 lifelink creatures, right? Yeah, that would be 1 life gain event. So the whenever you gain life would happen only once, but since they've got this rule, whenever that they changed it under the covers to mean whenever a source causes you to gain life, those 4 creatures are separate sources, so it would trigger 4 times. Okay? Also note that if something says gain 1 life for each card in your graveyard, or gain 1 life, gain life equal to the number of creatures you control, that's all 1 life gain event. It's not 1 per card. We don't just sit there and count. I've got 10 cards in my graveyard, so I'll gain 1, 2, 3. Those aren't separate life gains. All right, and now I'm going to ask a final question. This is for the audience. Let's assume that Aerith has 3 +1/+1 counters on her, and she blocks a 5/5 with Wither. Okay? Creatures with Wither deal combat damage in the form of -1/-1 counters. So what's going to happen?
Comment on the YouTube video.
Are we...
Or not.
Or not. This is a podcast.
Are we going to answer this?
Just a podcast. Yeah, answer this. Come on now.
So you're going to have a creature that state-based actions are going to check, and it's going to see a few state-based actions need to be performed. For example, there are 5 -1/-1 counters and 3 +1/+1 counters. So there are some counters that need to be, removed. But also, this creature has 0 toughness. So everything is going to happen simultaneously, and it's just going to go from the battlefield to the graveyard, and we'll have still had those 3 +1/+1 counters on it because it's just moving all at once. All the state-based actions are performing at the same time. So we'll still have had 3 +1/+1 counters on it.
Right. So the game, when it looks back, because all state-based actions are evaluated at the same time, we're going to remove Aerith Gainsborough from the battlefield. At the same time, we have the counters, the plus counters and the minus counters explode each other. Okay.
Yep.
And those all happen at the exact same time. But this trigger, when Aerith Gainsborough dies, put those counters in. We look at that as she existed on the battlefield. And when she was on the battlefield, she had a total of 8 counters on her. She had 3 +1/+1 counters and 5 -1/-1 counters on her. And that trigger only cares about those 3 +1/+1s. And I'm going to stop talking about Aerith Gainsborough because if I continue to talk about Aerith Gainsborough, then we're going to run out of time and we won't be able to talk about any of the cards that are not Aerith Gainsborough. Aerith Gainsborough.
Other cards like Ancient Adamantoise.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Is not Aerith Gainsborough.
Definitively not. Much meaner looking than the happy girl walking down the street with a basket full of flowers. No, this is a giant tortoise that looks like a mountain and has giant, apparently, adamantium or adamantoise fangs on it. I don't know. It's massive. It is 5 green for a creature turtle with vigilance, ward 3. It's an 8/20, so 20 toughness. And its abilities continue with damage isn't removed from this creature during cleanup steps. Not something you see every day. All damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to this creature instead. And when this creature dies, exile it and create 10 tapped treasure tokens. Oh boy, that's a lot. So, damage marked on this creature will stay marked on this creature through the cleanup step because the ability says you're not going to remove damage from me. However, effects that remove all damage from a permanent will still remove the damage from Ancient Adamantoise. The most likely way you'll do this is via regeneration. So when you regenerate a creature, you're creating effectively a regeneration shield around the creature that whenever you pop that regeneration shield, it taps it, removes it from combat, and also removes all damage from it. So that is a way you can clean up all the damage that has been building up slowly on your mountain turtle. And if this mountain turtle has a regeneration shield up, when it takes its 20th damage for you, it's just going to stick around, and now you got even more damage that it can soak up for you at that point.
That damage will be removed from it, yeah.
Yeah, so get another bite at the apple, have a mountain turtle step in front of you again.
I have a question. I haven't played Arena in a while. Does Arena still show damage marked on a creature as a reduction in toughness?
It does indeed. One of my least favorite things about Arena.
Right, so this thing will just slowly tick down.
Yeah,
but not
it's gonna look
really.
like an 815.
Yeah, it'll be like an 8-4, but it'll still really have 20 toughness.
Yep.
I wonder if Arena allows you to do the effect of doing damage with your toughness, and I wonder if it does. It does.
It'd have to. Aren't there some cards in the base set of Dragonstorm?
Then why wouldn't they fix that? Because that's really counterintuitive.
Don't know.
Fascinating.
Talking about why I don't play Arena is a whole nother podcast.
Moving on.
So let's talk about a really rare corner case here. Let's say you have 2 Ancient Adamantoises.
Yes, but what about second Adamantoises?
You get to choose at this point which redirection effect applies, because these are each trying to these are replacement effects. All damage that will be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to this creature instead. And when you have multiple replacement effects trying to apply to the same event, you choose which one applies first. So you can't split it up, most importantly. So if I were to be, let's say Bryan hits me with a lightning bolt, all 3 of that damage has to go to one of my 2 Adamantoises. If I get hit by 4 bear cubs for 8 damage, all 8 has to go to a single mountain turtle. And this is even rarer, but if Ancient Adamantoise is somehow phased out during your cleanup step with damage marked on it, then its second ability won't be active during the cleanup, and damage will be removed from it. So that's another way that you can get even more out of this already bonkers mountain turtle.
Yeah, you thought regeneration was corner casey enough. Well, let's just talk about phasing. All right.
Damage is removed from this creature during its cleanup steps.
Yeah, it still gets removed even from phased out creatures.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Because it has to.
Yeah, because if it didn't, then it would come back with damage marked on it at the beginning of your next untap or your beginning step. So
it all makes sense. It's just
ridiculous.
Wow, this is
when does it ever come up except for mountain turtles?
The funny thing is I think that the overall design for this card is probably informed by things that happen on Arena with the what's the special stuff that only exists on Arena. Those cards, alchemy cards. You know, this has a very alchemy type flavor to it where we're tracking damage from turn to turn to turn, right? You know, that's something that we wouldn't normally do. It's weird. It's weird. You know, don't have a cowman, I guess is what we would say. Speaking of don't have a cowman, I've got Bart's and Boko, which is a 4/3 legendary creature, human bird thing for 3 and 2 green. I guess it's a chocobo, right? That's what that bird thing is.
Yes.
So I'm told.
Yes.
If I told you it was it's a dinosaur.
Birds are dinosaurs anyway.
Yeah, there you go. It's a
Also,
dinosaur.
yes.
Right. So this has affinity for birds, which means the spell costs 1 less to cast for each bird you control.
Who doesn't have affinity for birds?
Everybody has affinity for birds, except for people who believe that birds are a conspiracy theory. They don't have, because they believe that birds aren't real anyway. This is just silly, right? Okay. Anyway, it also has a trigger. When Bart's and Boko enters, each other bird you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. So the ability only targets one creature. It doesn't matter how many birds you control. Also, the targeted creature doesn't get to fight back. It's just, a punch. It's not a fight.
Yep. All right. Everybody in the car, so come on, let's ride. It's Black Waltz number 3. No, nothing. All right. Black Waltz number 3 is 2 black and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature wizard with probably some of the coolest art in the set. But it has flying and death touch, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Black Waltz number 3 deals 2 damage to each opponent. So this creature actually has a similar ability to a lot of... there's a lot of cards that create these Black Mage tokens created in this set. So just cover that ability here. For this card and all the tokens, we just want to point out that the damage is going to be dealt before the non-creature spell resolves. Okay, this is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Black Waltz deals 2 damage. That is a cast trigger. The damage will be dealt before. All right. Speaking of triggers that resolve before their spell.
All right, so talking about really adorable art, Blazing Bomb has some of the coolest art that I've seen in the last 5 cards that we've looked at. The Blazing Bomb is a 1/1 red elemental. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and it has the ability Blow Up. Tap and sacrifice this creature. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So like Bryan alluded, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, that trigger from Blazing Bomb will resolve before the spell that actually triggered it. And the at least 4 mana clause looks at the actual mana that you spent to pay for the spell itself. So if you did something like pay life with Phyrexian mana, or Convoke, or Delved, that changes the amount of mana that was spent. Here, it only cares how much mana did you pay from your mana pool to cast this spell. And if at least 4 mana was spent, then trigger goes off. You're good to go.
It's a good way to carry around all that mana, all that cargo that you have of mana. You could put it all on a ship.
Nice.
It feels contrived. Anyway, cargo ship for 1 and a blue is a 2/3 artifact vehicle. It has flying vigilance. It has crew 1, and it has this interesting ability: tap, add 1 colorless mana. Spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source. So artifact source is an interesting way to say this, and it's because we typically see in a spell like this the ability to activate the ability of an artifact, but instead it says artifact source. So that actually means it applies to any card with the type of artifact, and that card could be in hand or in the graveyard. So when we look to cast it, make sure that we're realizing that it can affect spells that are outside of just the battlefield and what can be seen.
Okay. Next up, hey, look at Cecil the Dark Knight again. All right. So we talked about him a little bit earlier, but what I do want to point out, so Cecil has an ability that says whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Then, if your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, untap Cecil and transform it. We want to point out that if Cecil is dealt damage, like during combat, and dies as a result, you're still going to lose life equal to the amount of damage Cecil took. But Cecil in the graveyard, so Cecil ain't gonna be able to untap and be transformed. He did. Hey, Marcos, I got a question. Can we
What's
say things like kilt and dead and stuff now that we're also simul broadcasting on YouTube? Like, do I have to say like unalive whenever a creature
I would
is
like
unalived?
to hear you just say unalived a bunch. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
I'll try.
That is now the rule.
I'll try and do that. So,
Oh, no.
so
Don't do
dies
that.
isn't a thing. Dies isn't a thing anymore. It's unalived.
Yeah. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
We're
Continue.
gonna switch over this. I
Continue,
swear.
please.
On to Clash of the Icons. Icons? Unsure. For a single green mana, this is a sorcery that says choose one or more. Target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls. Remove a lore counter from target saga you control. And it has reminder text. Removing lore counters doesn't cause chapter abilities to trigger. And it says put a lore counter on target saga you control as the third option. So, if you put a lore counter on a creature outside of the typical turn-based action, it will cause the next chapter ability to trigger. Doesn't really care how that lore counter got put on the saga, as long as you got a lore counter added. Also, and we need to pretend that this is an instant for this rule, but if the final lore counter has been put on, and the final chapter ability has triggered, adding a lore counter won't cause the final chapter ability to trigger again. So let's say we have a saga and it is about to be on third, and we cast this with like Quicken or something that allows us to cast it at instant speed. Putting a lore counter on it, well, there is no further chapter ability that you can trigger by adding, let's say, a fourth lore counter to it. So it's just going to go, okay, thanks for the counter, bro. Bye, unalived, and move on.
Unalived.
Yeah. I'm going to make this a thing now.
Yep.
Go on.
Let's do it.
It sounds like it's a. I've got nothing. So the next card is a modal double face card, and we're really only concerned with the front face of the card, but we'll read both, although it has so many words. We have Clive Ifrit's Dominant. For 4 and 2 red is a 5/5 legendary creature, human noble warrior. Even the type line has 5 words in it. When Clive enters, you may discard your hand, then draw cards equal to your devotion to red. And our notes here really only pertain to this ability. So let's talk about that, and then we'll get to the rest of the card just so we cover our bases. You can still discard your hand even if there are no cards in your hand, is the first and really important point. So, you could sit there and say to your opponent, even though you're Hellbent, and Hellbent's an old mechanic that references having no cards in hand, you can say, hey, I'm going to discard my hand. And they will have to say, yes, I acknowledge you discarding your hand, even though you've got no cards there. The second part of this is that it's equal to your devotion in red. If you have auras or equipment that's attached to an opponent's creature for some reason, you still control those cards. They're still yours. So their mana symbols will count towards your devotion in red. That's important to know. Clive also has the ability for 4 and 2 red, which is the cost of casting Clive, and tap. You can exile Clive, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery. When it comes in on the other side, it's Ifrit, Warden of Inferno. It has it's a legendary enchantment creature, saga demon. It's a 9/9, and because it's a saga, it has 3 chapters. But the first one is lunge. Ifrit fights. If Ifrit fits, yes, that's right. That's exactly what I said. Ifrit fights up to 1 other target creature. And then for chapters 2 and 3, it has Brimstone, which is add 4 red mana. If Ifrit has 3 or more lore counters on it, exile it, then return it to the battlefield. Front face up. So, you go back and forth between Clive and Ifrit. Transforms back and forth. Must be some type of mechanic within the game. And while we're here, just for one moment before we move on to the next card, I want to point something out, which probably everybody who's listening to this already knows. But these cards from Final Fantasy and made by Magic the Gathering are a little bit unique. On the bottom of the cards, they have information about the artist, the set number, and so forth. on these cards, on all of the Final Fantasy cards, it has an additional piece of information, and that information is what game did this come from. So in this case, Clive comes from Final Fantasy 16 because it's FFXVI, which is, Roman numerals and stuff. But if you look on all of these cards, if you're interested and you're not sure on your lore, or you just want to make sure that you're the smartest person in the room, you can say, well, it came from Final Fantasy 2. It'll tell you that. It's right there on each of the cards. Kind of cool. Anyway, next card.
Yep. So the next card came from the first Kingdom Hearts game. That's right. This was original character from the first Kingdom Hearts game, Cloud Midgar Mercenary.
Pretty sure I played him in a fighting game somewhere.
Yep. And then down at the bottom it says KH1 at the bottom of the card. Yep. Cloud Midgard Mercenary. For white, it's a 2/1 legendary creature, human soldier mercenary. It says when Cloud enters, search. Now Cloud, it's just Cloud, but for Aerith Gainsborough, we wrote the whole name out. Anyway, when Cloud enters, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. As long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. All right, so first off, we're going to go over real quick. I know it's a joke that for players, everything's a trigger, but it's not. Triggered abilities start with when, whenever, and at. Cloud's last ability doesn't copy the triggered ability. It causes it to trigger an additional time. So it's a separate instance. So any choices that are made for the first time you put the trigger on this die, they're not forced upon the second. However, if you are trying to have an ability trigger an additional time, that trigger can only trigger once per turn, it's not going to trigger an additional time. Okay. Finally, a little bit of complexity is, well, what happens with dies triggers? Okay, if the equipment has like whenever Cloud dies or is unalived, rather. If there is an equipment trigger that would trigger when the equipped creature is unalived, and that equipment is equipped to Cloud, it will trigger twice. That's because for leaves the battlefield triggers, we look at the permanent as it existed on the battlefield, and at the time it was equipped. Ta-da!
All right, next up, we're going to look at, I don't even know what I'm looking at, but they call it a diamond weapon. Also, another massive green creature. Apparently, these are just what I'm getting during these release notes. But for 7 and then green, you get a legendary artifact creature elemental. That's an 8/8. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent card in your graveyard. It has reach and a flavor keyword of immune. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to diamond weapon. So here, let's talk about damage prevention effects. Here, it prevents damage from being dealt to the creature in combat, right? But it doesn't prevent the assignment of damage. So let's say Charles has this massive 12/12 creature with trample that is being blocked by my diamond weapon. Even though you won't be able to actually deal the combat damage to my diamond weapon, you must still assign the damage to the creature before any damage would trample over. So it's not like I'll just soak up all the damage because, you can't deal damage to me, haha, or like you can ignore it. You do have to assign as much damage as would be considered lethal to the defending creature before trample would let you assign any damage to the defending player or planeswalker or battle.
Boo.
I know. Also, is this Hogak? I hear that this might be a Hogak. I don't know. Time will tell.
I don't know. I don't know.
It's probably not. It's an uncommon. That doesn't sell packs.
Oh, my sweet summer child.
No, because you can't cast it from your graveyard, and it doesn't have trample.
Sure.
That's probably fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's only an 8/8. It's with reach. Reach? Why does it have reach?
Because it's gotta have.
Look at that thing.
Look,
we
look.
really need.
Do you want to know?
We really need the blog back that talked about.
Do you want to know why?
Creatures that had hidden reach, because and we all know who wrote that.
Do you want to know why?
Yeah.
It's because this is just Modern Horizons 4, and Modern Horizons sets have started having Hidden Reach cards hidden in the middle of the text.
No, Hidden Reach has been around for a long time. Anyway, the Darkness Crystal for 2 and 2 black is a legendary artifact. I'm very excited to talk about it because it's actually a series of crystals. Oh, we're going to get there. There. Okay, so black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. If non-token creatures and opponent controls would die, if a non-token creature and opponent controls would die, you instead exile it and it gains 2 life. And for 4/2 black in a tap, you put target creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield, tapped and under your control, with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So this is a cycle of cards, and they're all something crystal, and they all have a replacement effect, except for apparently the red one, which just gives your creatures haste, which I'm really excited about, but somebody's sad who wrote the show notes, and a cost reduction effect for their color. Cost reductions apply when calculating the cost of a spell. To do so, you take the mana cost of the spell or the alternate cost you choose to cast the spell with, and then you add the additional costs. You subtract any cost reductions, and then, 3-ball. Trinisphere, folks. Cost reductions don't change the mana value of the spell. That's always determined by the mana cost on the top right corner of a card. And replacement effects have to exist before the event they're replacing happens. So if the Darkness Crystal leaves the battlefield at the same time as one or more creatures and opponent controls would die, you will still exile those creatures and gain life. And I just want to remind people that the reflector will capture the beams of the Dark Crystal floating high above. Look into the reflector, podling. Feel the power of the Dark Crystal.
Have you seen the TV series that was on Netflix?
So I have about the same commitment to that as I did to Final Fantasy VII. I got in about 2.5 episodes, and I noped out of it because I was falling asleep every time I turned it on.
Oh, it's okay. So they did a television series for the Dark Crystal. It was only a season, and it is amazing.
I'll have to try again.
The story is
more caffeinated.
Goodish. But just the artistry, when you look at how many practical effects that they had, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. It was
art.
Pretty. I just the story didn't do it for me.
Okay, well, it didn't have you on the edge of your seat of the sanctum.
Hey,
that's a segue.
Yes, Eden, where you pay for the whole seat of the sanctum, but you'll only need the anctum. So, Eden, Seat of the Sanctum, is a land. Tap, add a colorless, or 5, tap, mill 2 cards. Then you may sacrifice this land. When you do, oh, look at that, it's a reflexive trigger. When you do, return another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. All right, so what this means is, you do not have to, when you pay 5 and tap, you do not have to declare the target permanent that you're going to return from your graveyard to your hand. You are going to first get to mill the 2 cards, see what you milled, then you get to decide if you're going to sacrifice the land. When you sacrifice the land, or when you choose to sacrifice the land, then you're going to get to target a permanent and put it in the graveyard. Put it from the graveyard to your hand. Absolutely. I got no segues.
Well, I hear it's good to be the king. And Edgar, King of Figaro, definitely proves that to be so. So, Edgar, King of Figaro is 4 blue for a 4/5 legendary creature, human artificer noble. Hey, it's a noble and it's a king. That's cool. When Edgar enters, draw a card for each artifact you control. And it has an ability called Two-Headed Coin. The first time you flip 1 or more coins each turn, those coins come up heads, and you win those flips. Yeah, it's good to be the king. So Edgar's coin flip replacement effect basically tells you to ignore whatever the result of the coin or coins that are flipped are whenever you apply the ability. And yes, you heard right, coin or coins. If you have an effect that tells you to flip more than one coin at once, and you haven't flipped one yet during that turn, then Edgar's ability will modify the entire set of flips. So let's take everyone's favorite coin flip card, Ral Zarek.
Well,
specifically
that's everyone's favorite coin flip card.
I thought it was Krark.
Oh, no. We love Ral Zarek because he works for these examples. So, Ral Zarek, everyone's favorite coin flip card, specifically his ultimate ability. If you haven't flipped any coins this turn, you will have all 5 coins that you flip for Ral Zarek's ultimate come up heads, regardless of what you actually flip on those coins. So you'll take 5 extra turns. Neat. Also, you will win those flips, even if the effect that causes you to flip those coins doesn't actually care about winning or losing. So again, with Ral, you'll flip 5 coins, and they'll all come up heads, which is great for turn taking. But you also win each of those 5 coin flips, which would be really helpful if you control a chancing counter, which cares about whenever you win a coin flip. So those 5 coins from Ral will also give you 5 wins of a coin flip, meaning you get 5 luck counters on your chance encounter.
Yeah. So I have a coin flip EDH deck, so I kind of want to point this out. Okay.
Sweet.
So Ral Zarek tells you to flip 5 coins. Anything that tells you to flip X coins, you're going to, and it's the first time, you're going to win them all. They're all going to come up heads. Cool. If you have something like Zinder Split Eye of Wisdom that says flip a coin until you lose a flip, that's just a series of single coin flips one after the other because you're checking after each one. Okay, so that it doesn't mean you get to draw infinite cards, or with a Cone Eye of Chaos you get to go infinite with the power. Okay, those are single coin flips. Just wanted to point that out because this this card has different effects based on everyone that's got that heads I win, tails I lose. It's a very clear upgrade.
Yeah,
deck tax with JudgeCast.
Exactly. And this is probably one of the few times we're actually going to go that deep into coin flipping mechanics. So you're welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Check off that on your bingo card. And we're going to be able to check something else off on our bingo card, intervening if clauses. So let's take a look at Emmett Selch, Unsundered. That's a mouthful. For 1 blue and a black, a 2/4 legendary creature Elder Wizard is Emmett Selch, Unsundered. And they have Vigilance. Whenever Emmett Selch enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Emmett Selch. And when you transform Emmett Selch, Emmett turns into Hades, Sorcerer of Eld, a 6/6 legendary creature avatar that has Vigilance. It has Echo of the Last. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard. Ooh, spicy. And if a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, you exile instead. So, Emmett Selch's last ability checks at the beginning of your upkeep, and the trigger will only go onto the stack if the requirements are true. So if you control 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you get your trigger. However, the trigger does check again when it goes to resolve. So if Marcos activates his Tormod's Crypt in response to your trigger and makes your graveyard disappear, well, then it won't happen because it will no longer satisfy the conditions of the trigger. On the Hades side, the ability that lets you play lands from your graveyard doesn't change the timing restriction of your lands. You still have 1 land play per turn. You can only play a land as a special action when the stack is empty, so on, so on, so on. Lands are pretty standard. We know how they all work by now. If you discard a card when you control Hades, any abilities that care about a card being discarded will still work, such as Madness. Discarding a card is the act of moving it from your hand to another zone. While it's usually the graveyard, effects that modify where things would go could send it to exile, for example, like Madness or this replacement effect. And those abilities that care about the discarded card can still find it in exile. The ability will make it so no cards go to your graveyard. So unalive triggers won't happen because the card never goes to the graveyard. Yeah, we're leaning into it. I'm sorry.
All right.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
So
So the
many
next
words.
card, Esper Origins, which I believe Esper's Origins, it's kind of weird that it's a green card when Esper is clearly white, blue, black. But for one and a green,
Somebody didn't get the
Esper
memo.
Origins, yep, is a sorcery with Surveil 2. You gain 2 life. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, exile it. Then put it onto the battlefield transformed under its owner's control with a finality counter on it. Then it's got flashback for green, for 3 and a green. And then when it's on the battlefield transformed, it is summon Esper Mauduin. It's an enchantment creature, Saga Elemental. It's 4/4. Chapter 1 is reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, put it in your hand. Chapter 2 is add green. And Chapter 3, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. It's not creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn, because that would include Esper Mauduin, and he unalived. Or she, or I can't tell. The Saga Elemental. Okay, so let's talk about finality counters. Those things, they work on any permanent, not just counters. Finality counters set up a replacement effect that says, if a creature with finality counter with one or more finality counters on it would die, exile it instead. I'm sorry, if it would become unalived, exile it instead. Finality counters won't stop the card from going from elsewhere, like the hand or the library. It just replaces it going to the graveyard from the battlefield with exile it, yo. Finality counters, they're not keyword counters. They don't grant an ability to the permanent that they're on. Okay, so you can't do anything tricksy like with dress down or something like that, making it lose that ability so that you can get into the graveyard and still and keep it. Multiple finality counters are redundant. All right, rules for transforming double face cards. Sorcery, which this is, Esper Origins, can't be put on the battlefield, and a permanent can't transform into a sorcery. The game doesn't like instants and sorceries on the battlefield. It can't happen, and if something tries to tell you to do it, you just don't. And then that second chapter ability on Esper Mauduin, that add green, that's not a mana ability. Why is it not a mana ability? It's a triggered ability that adds mana to your mana pool. Why isn't it a triggered mana ability? And the reason is, it's not a triggered mana ability because triggered mana abilities only trigger off of activated mana abilities. And this ain't that.
Yep. Now, to that end, what is a mana ability is the ability of our next card, Ether, which is actually spelled without a ligature for some reason. But hey, we're in Final Fantasy world, so I guess Ether is just spelled E-T-H-E-R. So Ether is an artifact for 3 and a blue that says tap, exile this artifact, add a blue to your mana pool. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, speaking of mana abilities, this is a mana ability, therefore it can't be responded to and does not use the stack, which also means that the entire ability is the mana ability. So you can't prevent a player from getting the bonus text from activating this ability and can't respond to prevent it from happening. You get the mana and you get the ability that's stapled onto it as well. Now when that ability resolves, it doesn't care if you used the mana generated from Ether to pay for the spell that is cast, it just happens. So now that we're talking about copies, let's talk about specifically some of the parts of copy that are written on this card, like you may choose new targets for the copy. If the spell has any targets that you cast, the copy will have the same ones unless you choose to change any number of targets the spell required. They do have to be legal targets still, though. Now, if the spell that is copied is modal, and you can tell it's a modal spell because it has the choose one and a big hyphen after it, you're still locked into the chosen mode or modes. You can't choose different modes, you can only choose new targets. If a copied spell divides damage or distributes counters among any number of targets, The division and number of targets can't be changed. If you choose new targets, you must choose the same number of targets. And the damage or distribution division is all the same. If the spell that's copied has an X whose value was determined as it was cast, then the copy will have the same value. And you can't choose to pay any additional costs for the copy. However, any effects that are based on any additional costs being paid when the spell was cast will still be copied. So for this one, if you have like a tormenting voice where you have to discard a card as an additional cost to cast it, the copy will see that that was already paid and just be good to go. And finally, the copy of this spell is created on the stack, so it's not cast and will not trigger any abilities that trigger when a player casts a spell.
Why does this exile itself?
I assume it has to do with some sort of artifact mana recursion combo.
Yeah, it's got to be preventing a combo of some kind.
Yeah.
It seems weird. Like, it doesn't seem inherently busted.
No, but because it's an artifact, it doesn't suffer from summoning sickness. So if you had some way to recur it back to the battlefield, it could just do the thing over and over and over and over again, and that's probably all it's trying to prevent. It could even be future-proofing. Yeah. Sometimes they do stuff to just future-proof. I don't know. I don't know what.
It's in case you copy an instant or sorcery that lets you get back an artifact from your graveyard.
Yeah,
you could chain it that way. Okay, yeah. Got it.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah, okay.
Okay. So we don't want that to be the final act of the show, so we're going to talk about Galoofs. Is it Galoof? Galoof?
Sure. Galoof.
We'll call him Galoof. I don't know if it's right or not, but it's Final Fantasy.
Probably not, but it's fun.
We're going to go
Snicker snack, yes.
Galoof's final act for 1 and a green is an instant, and it has the phrasing until end of turn. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains when this creature dies. Put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on up to one target creature. Neat. You use the dying creature's power as it last existed on the battlefield to determine the number of +1/+1 counters on the target creature. Notably, if you use something like Tragic Slip and put its power to 0 or negative numbers, no counters will be put onto the creature. This is not strategy cast, but it's good to know these types of things, right? Right.
Okay, so this next card got a lot less cool the more I read it. Because at first, I was like, Gigatoad! It's like the Giga Chad version of a toad.
No, but it's...
But no, it's Gigantoad. But it's going to be Gigatoad to me.
Sounds like a medical condition.
Gigatoad?
No, Gigantoad. It sounds like a medical condition where you have like a really big pinky toe.
Or a hydrocell or something like that. Yeah.
Something.
For 3 and a green, Gigantoad. Now I can't undo it. It's 3 and a green for a 4/4 creature frog. As long as you control 7 or more lands, this creature gets +2/+2. As long as you control 7 or more lands, Aerith Gainsborough gets +2/+2.
And is not unalived.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. With your Gigatoad, remember that damage remains marked on the creature until the cleanup step. So if you could have damage marked on this creature, and then you sack a land to do something, it could drop down to a 4/4, and it could die. So just watch out. Now, there is one cool scenario. Let's say you got your Giga Chad out, and it's a 6/6 because you got 7 lands, and it's got 5 damage marked on it. Okay, and then you scape shift, and you sack a whole mess of your lands, dropping down below 7. Okay, scape shift has you sack any number of lands, search your library for that many land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped. Okay, during the resolution of scape shift, you did drop below 7 land. It did Gigantoad did drop down to a 4/4, but we don't check state-based actions in the middle of resolving a spell. And we finish resolving scape shift, we put lands back on the battlefield, and then when we check state-based actions to see if Gigantoad should be unalived, the answer is no, because now the game sees it as a 6/6.
Sweet. That's heckin' sweet.
Heckin'
and
sweet.
These are heckin' sweet. Just like these heck dies that are. This is such creepy art. Oh my goodness.
Are we cleaning this up for YouTube? I mean, really, it should be Hell Eyes, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Hecdies is a creature ooze horror for 1 and a black. It is a 1/1. And it says when this creature enters, each opponent discards a card. That's a really simple card. Why are we even bringing this card up? Well, this is where we like to talk about how the act of discarding happens, especially if you have multiple opponents. So discarding here will happen in turn order, and players are going to choose the card they're going to discard, notably before they actually do the act of discarding. So let's say you're in a 4-player commander game. In this instance, the next opponent in turn order chooses a card to discard, and they kind of just set it aside or note it. They're like, okay, hold it up, this one. But they don't put it face up in the graveyard yet. Then each other opponent in turn order does the same thing until everybody has chosen. Then those cards are discarded simultaneously and revealed at the same time. So most importantly, you don't get to know what the identity of the cards that are being discarded are before you get to make your choice. That's all revealed at the same time. Unlike...
You're going to ruin me one of these days. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Kefka Court Mage and Kefka Ruler of Ruin for 2 blue, black, red. It's a 4/5 legendary creature human wizard. Whenever Kefka enters or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. And as an activated ability for 8 mana, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice. Transform Kefka. Activate only as a sorcery. And when we transform Kefka, we get Ruler of Ruin, a legendary creature avatar wizard that's a 5/7 with flying. And whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So, as a reminder, card types are Artifact, Battle, Creature, Enchantment, Instant, Kindred, Land, Planeswalker, and Sorcery. The things that we see on a type line like Legendary and Basic and Snow, those are all super types. They're not card types. Hero and Saga are subtypes, not card types. For more, get to see our L1 video regarding card types, or check out any of our previous episodes where we go deep on card types. That's just a little commercial there for all of y'all at home. The last ability works similarly to Hecdies, in that each player in turn order makes their choice. However, the choice will be visible to other players as you go around the table. So each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice. So the permanents are on the battlefield, right? So they choose which one they're going to sacrifice. Everybody knows what they are. And then once everybody's made their selection, all the permanents are sacrificed at the same time. They are unalived simultaneously. Awesome.
All right. Where does a general keep his armies?
In his sleeveys.
In his sleeveys. All right.
That's a
Next up. Yep. Next card that we're going to talk about is Lightning, Army of One. For 1, a red and a white. She's a 3/2 legendary creature human soldier. First strike, trample, and lifelink. Okay, pretty good. Pretty good. And has an ability Stagger. It says, whenever lightning deals combat damage to a player until your next turn, if a source would deal damage to that player or a permanent that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. Holy smokes. All right. This is... Okay. Predominantly play a commander, but oh boy does this put a big red X on someone. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, a few notes. When damage is doubled, the damage is dealt by the same source as the original source of that damage. Okay? So, the thing that did damage is the thing that deals the extra doubling damage as well. All right. Let's play pretend for a second and say that lightning gained double strike. Okay.
I'm in love.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good... It's bonkers.
So, okay.
I'm going to build this.
Yeah.
I had a feeling you would.
Yeah. Okay. So when damage is doubled, the damage is dealt by the same source as the original source of the damage. So this basically just means the thing that's dealing damage is the thing that deals the double damage as well. It's not like some other third source, third party damage. Okay. So let's talk about just what it normally means to double damage. So lightning hits, first strike. Okay, great, sure. The trigger resolves. So until my next turn, if a source would deal damage, cool. I attacked with lightning and a bear cub. Lightning hits, first strike, damage happens. Trigger goes on the stack, resolves. Now my bear cub is going to go deal damage. My bear cub is now going to deal 4 damage to the opponent. Okay? But my opponent has a card that says, hey, whenever you would take damage, you take 1 less. Okay? So I've got one thing that's saying I'm going to double damage, and another thing saying, hey, whenever you're going to take damage, you take 1 less. How does that work? Do I take the 2, reduce it down to 1, and then double it back to 2, or do I take the 2, double it, go to 4, and then reduce to 1? Well, the answer is the person being affected by the event, or the controller or the owner of the objects that are being affected by that event. So if I was attacking Charles with lightning and a bear cub, and Charles had this made up damage prevention card, Charles would actually get to decide in what order to put the replacement effects. Okay? Now let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's say bear cub is a giga cub. Okay? It's a big 5/5 trampling bear cub. All right? You don't just get to say, oh, well, my 5/5 bear cub is automatically going to deal 10 damage. Okay? Because it's doubled. It actually... so if my 5/5 trampling bear cub, Charles throws a 2/2 in its way, I can't just say I'll assign 2 to the 2/2 and the 8 will trample over. What I have to do is, the damage gets doubled. It's still a 5/5. So I have to assign 2 to Charles's blocker, and then 3 will trample over to the opponent, to Charles. Well, when that gets doubled, that then gets doubled. So the creature that took 2 will actually take 4, and Charles was originally going to take 3, now he takes 6. Okay, does that make sense? So you have to assign the damage, and then it doubles. You can't just double it and then assign it. All right. Now we got a little bit of an algebra problem here. Let's say lightning done got double strike. Okay, so first strike damage happens. Trigger goes on the stack. Then, because she's got double strike, she's going to deal regular strike. Okay, so she did 3 in first strike. Now she's going to do 6 in regular strike. And that stagger trigger is going to trigger again. So I've now got 2 replacement effects that say, hey, if next time something deals damage, you're going to double it and then double it again.
So double, toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron bubble?
I mean, a little bit. I would just say lightning bolt your face for 12. Because the 3 will double to 6, and then 6 will double to 12.
I know you're saying you're doing all this to me, but I am building this.
You just did 21 points of damage.
Everyone else.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this a math problem for everybody else, yo. All right. So this next card, I think I'm gonna take that because this is a thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit. This isn't a specific card. This is just the summons in general. There's an interesting thing in policy where we specifically have we've made a big point about lore counters going on sagas being turn-based actions that happen at the beginning of your main phase. Well, in tournament play, players treat these like triggers. I forgot my trigger. Because it's the counter goes on and it creates a trigger. And the reason why these are turn-based actions is most likely probably because Arena. Because if the triggers went on the stack in Arena, they'd be really, really obnoxious. Okay. However, so we treat missing a lore counter as a missed trigger. It's technically a game rules violation, but we treat it as a missed trigger. Which raises the question, now with enchantment creatures, is missing the final saga, upping the final chapter ability, is that a detrimental trigger? Because these are all creatures and you lose that creature. They've all necessarily got sacrifice this creature stapled onto them.
It's a really good question.
And technically, right now, the answer is no. Okay? Because it's not actually a trigger, and direction has previously been no sagas, the third chapters, none of them are detrimental. But now we're losing a creature. And so we don't have an answer yet as to whether or not we should count missing your third or final saga trigger, air quotes, the thing that causes you to sacrifice your creature, as a detrimental trigger or not. We don't have direction for that. So stay tuned. When we have something conclusive, I feel like it should be detrimental. I've talked to some other people that feel that it should not be.
If it ends up being GRV, do you see it as being a situation where this is going to be a situation where policy?
So it's not GRV. It is a GRV, but we've been told to wink and a nod and treat it like mistrigger.
Right, but if it were GRV, we would maybe remove it from. I don't know. It's weird, right?
The reason why we don't treat it as a GRV is because if we treated it as a GRV, the solution is leave it as is or rewind, and we did that. We did that for years. We've only recently, and by recently I mean within the last year, changed it to be treated as a mistrigger. Okay. And we previously didn't have to worry about if any of these things were detrimental or not.
Right.
So this is getting into a little bit of policy and why you tuned in for JudgeCast to talk about cards that you've heard other YouTubers talk about to death for the last 3 weeks. But this is the kind of thing that we think about is when they were just enchantments, your third trigger or your third your final lore ability was you wanted that ability and you didn't really care about the enchantment after that fact. Okay, but now these things are creatures and they actually have a value on the battlefield if you, air quotes, forget your final count, your final chapter trigger, in quotes again.
Yeah, they're a blocker. They could be representing lethal damage next turn. They could be any number of things that create a sticky policy situation here. So so don't actually know yet. I would tend to treat it like a detrimental trigger and give the warning and give the opponent the opportunity to put it on the stack. Yeah, tune in 2 weeks when we have policy updates. Maybe, who knows?
We'll see. Hopefully,
maybe.
Who knows?
I don't know. But anyway, that's our little interlude. Now that's our little policy break.
All right. So next up is Tifa's Limit Break. So for a single green mana, this is an instant with our new tiered ability. So you're going to choose one additional cost. The first one is Somersault. For 0 additional mana, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Meteor Strikes. For 2 generic additional mana, double target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. And Final Heaven. 6 and a green additional mana, triple target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Wow. So, this card is cool in that we're going to talk a little bit about doubling power and toughness and how this all works. So, back into Mathland, doubling your power is typically giving the creature +X+0, where X is its current power. In this instance, tripling would be 2X plus 2X+0, where X is its current power. So you're going to double the current power and add that as a +2 its current power, So the result would be 3 times its total power. Oh boy, nothing like talking out algebra equations. And then you're going to do the same kind of algebra for the toughness. And it's specific because the power and toughness aren't always going to be the same. So you have to do plus X plus Y for the doubling of power and toughness, where X and Y are the current power and toughness respectively. And tripling would be 2X plus 2Y as double the current power and toughness. Or just pull out a calculator and hit X3 on whatever the number is in each of these that you're trying to figure out, and you're good. But the way it's written, especially in the release notes here, can be a little misleading. Because you see, I thought it was a typo when I first read this, where it said, oh yeah, to triple it, add twice its normal power. I was like, wait, twice? I thought we were talking triple? I was confused, and it's just written weird.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you got to add twice in order to get... You got to add twice to once to get 3.
Yes. 2 plus 1 is in fact 3. That is math I can get behind. Let's go.
Let's travel a little.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, okay. We're going to go traveling with the traveling chocobo. For 2 and a green, a 3/2 creature bird. The traveling chocobo allows you to look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast bird spells from the top of your library. And if a land or bird you control entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Trigger, trigger, trigger. I'm going to do.
Don't make me bring back the song.
Yeah. That song's great. Maybe we should play that. Okay, let's go through this. You can look at the top card whenever you want. That action itself does not actually use the stack. It's just something you can do. You can look at it and then look at it again and look at it again. If the top card of your library changes in the middle of casting a spell, however, playing a land, or activating the ability, you can't look at the new card until you're done, finishing casting that spell. You still have to follow the normal timing rules for playing lands and casting bird spells from the top of your library. If a bird enters with an enter the battlefield trigger, its own trigger will trigger an additional time. Trigger, 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 trigger. Yeah, it's catchy. We can do this. Replacement effects as this enters, for example, don't interact with the traveling chocobo. If you have 2 of these things, you get 3 total triggers, not 4. Reference the previous card for math rules. It's not doubling, it's plus 1ing. Now, if we have traveling chocobo enter the battlefield with another bird, and that bird has an enter the battlefield trigger, then it will trigger an additional time. Why is that different from as this enters? Because it's looking for a trigger. If a triggered ability is linked to a second ability, additional instances of that triggered ability are also linked to that second ability. If the second ability refers to the exiled card, it refers to all cards exiled by instances of the triggered ability. In some cases, involving linked abilities, an ability requires information about that exiled card. When this happens, the ability gets multiple answers. If these answers are being used to determine the value of a variable, the sum is used. For example, if Clive's Hideaway ability triggers twice, 2 cards are eventually exiled. The last ability of Clive's Hideaway will allow you to cast both exiled cards without paying their mana costs, assuming you control 4 or more legendary creatures at that time. Clear as mud. Go back and listen to this and look at the cards and listen to it and then look at the cards again and then listen to it, and somewhere in there it will probably gel.
It just means like hideaway triggers twice, right, with your traveling chocobo. And hideaway is when this land enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile one of them face down. So you're going to get to do that twice, right? And so both of those cards are going to be hidden away under Clive's Hideaway. Clive's Hideaway has 2 tap. You may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Okay, well, I've got 2 cards. Which one's my exiled card? And it's going to let you, because of the way this has worked, both of those cards for the exiled cards, so you get to do both.
Got him.
Bonus.
Yep. All right. The next card is Ultima. This one is 3 white for a sorcery. Destroy all artifacts and creatures. Period. End the turn. Period. All right. Let's talk about what end the turn means. Because it's not just Ultima Go. Although it's going to work that way a lot. Okay, so ending the turn means the following stuff happens in the following order. Okay. Triggered abilities that have triggered and have not yet been put on the stack yet. Because remember, things can trigger in the middle of casting a spell or stuff like that, and they wait until a player would get priority before they're added to the stack. Okay, so stuff that has triggered and hasn't yet been put on the stack, they just go poof. Just straight off. Okay, all spells and abilities that are still on the stack, they get exiled. Even Ultima. Okay. However, we're going to finish resolving. We finish resolving Ultima's ability. This includes spells that are uncounterable. Okay, they're just straight up gone. Go to exile. Bop. If this is somehow even though this is a sorcery, if we are somehow in combat, all attacking and blocking creatures get yanked out of combat. All right, we're going to check state-based actions right away. Players aren't going to get priority. No triggered abilities that might have triggered from those state-based actions are put on the stack at this time. Then the current stepper phase ends. It's done. And we go straight to cleanup. Gotta have a cleanup. Still gotta have a cleanup. Now, once we hit cleanup, and we go to cleanup and we do the discard, any new triggers that might have triggered via this process are now put on the stack. And if they are put on the stack, then players can get priority. Okay? Does that make sense?
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just ending the turn. Do all the things that you do when you're ending the turn, right?
Except,
yes.
We're exiling a whole lot. Or not a lot.
Right.
But
Yeah,
we're
are.
exiling,
Right.
which is weird, but that's fine. It explains
The big thing is the tricksy things that triggered abilities that have triggered but not yet have been put on the stack, they just go poof. Because you could do some weird stuff with that if they didn't. Anywho.
True.
That's the technical term. They go poof.
They go poof, yes.
Yeah.
So now we have what I'm actually excited to potentially build a commander deck around, which is saying something because I don't think I've built a new commander deck in almost 10 years now. So the Wandering Minstrel has me thinking a lot. So let's look at it. The Wandering Minstrel, a green and a blue, legendary creature, human bard. It's a 1/3, and it has the abilities lands you control, enter untapped.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. I wonder why I would be concerned about that. Well, I'll tell you all about the commander deck in a bit. It's gonna be a Amulet Titan history commander deck where every card that's ever been playable or played in Amulet Titan is in a commander deck. Let's go.
Is it gonna make finals last 12 hours?
We'll see.
We're gonna get to that.
No.
conversation.
I'm trying to kill everybody like in one shot in as fast as humanly possible. This is the anti.
Bless you.
Yes.
Go on.
Going on to the Minstrel's Ballad. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, create a 2/2 elemental creature token that's all colors. And then it has this wonderful ability, 3 white, blue, black, red, and green. Other creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of towns you control. So let's start off with what happens if a land has an ability that says it enters the battlefield tapped, and you have a Wandering Minstrel on the battlefield. So you get to choose the order in which that ability's effect and the Wandering Minstrel's effect would apply. You have 2 replacement effects that are saying this will either enter tapped or untapped, so you choose one to apply first, and then the other will apply if still relevant. So this means effectively you can choose to have the land enter tapped or untapped. Now, if a land you control is simply put onto the battlefield tapped without a replacement effect being applied, like you're resolving a spell that just says, oh, and then search your library for land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then it just always enters untapped if you control the Wandering Minstrel. If the Wandering Minstrel would enter the battlefield at the same time a land you control would enter the battlefield tapped, that land still enters the battlefield tapped. With any replacement effects, it has to exist before the event it's trying to replace would happen. The Wandering Minstrel's second ability checks at the moment it would trigger to see if you control 5 or more towns. Intervening if clause, here we go again. We've already talked about this. If you don't have that many lands, then the ability won't even trigger at all. But if it does trigger, the ability will check again as it tries to resolve. And if you don't satisfy all the conditions, it will not resolve and none of the effects will happen. And finally, the value of X is calculated only once as the Wandering Minstrel's last ability resolves, not when you activate it. So things can still happen while that triggered ability is on, or while that activated ability is still on the stack, and that number of X will be determined when you are resolving.
Yep. You could lose some lands and it'll change that value of X. Yeesh.
Definitely can. Yeah, I'm excited to potentially build a commander deck around this. This seems really cool.
Yoshi!
Yoshi?
The next card is...
What?
Yoshtola Rule? Yashtola Rule? Ishtola Rule? Yoshi!
We're
just going to...
Doyle Rules.
Doyle Rules.
Doyle Rules.
We're just going to call it Yoshi Rules. Is 4 blue for 3, a 3 and a red, and is a legendary creature cat druid, because we needed a cat druid. I bet that ticked a box somewhere. At the beginning of your end step, exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Then, if it's the first end step of the turn, there is an additional end step after this step. So that ability is on all one ability, and it has a target. So if someone kills it in response, the trigger will be removed from the stack, and there will be no additional end step. Abilities that trigger at the beginning of your end step will trigger during both end steps, assuming that the cards are still on the battlefield. And you can somehow sneak cards onto the battlefield during your first end step that care about triggering at the beginning of your end step, and they'll trigger on the second one. Neat, right? Note that having multiple end steps does not give you multiple cleanups. The end phase is made up of the end step and the cleanup step. So it would be end step, cleanup step. Not end step, clean up, end step, cleanup. It would be end step, cleanup.
All within the end phase.
All within the end phase.
Yep.
All right.
All according to plan. All right. Last card. Xenos Ye Galvus. Jeez.
Where do they come up with these names? I love them.
Okay. For 3 black for a 4/4 legendary creature, human noble warrior, with the ability, my first friend. Oh, wonderful. That's so nice. When Xenos Ye Galvus enters, choose a creature an opponent controls. Until the end of turn, creatures other than Xenos Ye Galvus and Aerith Gainsborough and the chosen creature get -2/-2. Then, when the chosen creature leaves the battlefield, transforms Xenos Ye Galvus, and he transforms into Shinru Transcendent Rival, which is a 8/8 legendary creature dragon with flying that says, as this creature transforms into Shinru, choose an opponent, and has Burning Chains, the flavor words. It says, when this chosen player loses the game, you win the game. All right, so let's talk about this. First off, that last ability for Shinru, we're not going to really talk about Xenos a whole lot. We're going to talk about Shinru. That last ability, when the chosen player loses the game, you win the game. That wording has no meaning outside of a multiplayer game. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because that just is not a thing in 1v1. Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, it's still true. You choose your opponent, and when they lose the game, you do win the game.
Yeah, that is a true statement. So here's what I am going to throw this out, that if you are playing a Range of Influence game, a commander game with Range of Influence, I'm going off the release notes here. Winning the game just means everyone within your range of influence loses the game. So, Xenos Ye Galvus, not so great in Grand Melee. All right. That being said, If you clone the front side of Xenos Ye Galvus, you are going to get to choose a creature, because this is when it enters, you choose a creature an opponent controls. If you clone the backside, though, you do not get to choose an opponent. Okay, and that's because it says, as this creature transforms into Shinru, not as it enters the battlefield or anything like that. If you clone the backside, it did not transform into Shinru. Okay. If you are, however, able to create a token copy of Zenros Ye Galvus, you might be able to, you'll get to choose a creature for the front side, and you might be able to choose an opponent on the backside. It depends on, no, actually you are going to get it, because this says when the chosen creature leaves the battlefield, transform Xenos. So that means your token copy will just transform straight up, because this isn't one of the ones that exiles and then brings back. So that's all I got to say about that. That's all the cards that we're talking about. We're not going to talk about any of the commander cards, because holy crap.
We don't have the time for that.
Yeah, have fun making this into a YouTube video there, Marcos.
I do want to point out that the commander sets are really neat in one regard. They released, well, yeah, I think so. They released the decks before they actually started going through the set release for this. And when they released the decks, they released them at the same time, and they had all of the cards in Oracle in Gatherer right away, right? They were all right there. And not only were they were all there with Final Fantasy art. So when you typically get in previous sets the release of the deck lists for the different commander decks, it'll have, Soul Ring, and it'll have the art from whatever the original Soul Ring is, or from 5 years ago. But it may have a special art for that Soul Ring for that set, but you don't actually see it until all of the information drops weeks later. In this case, they went and they not only released the information before they started doing pre-release season, they also released it with the full art of the new cards, and it was really neat to go through and look at it. So kudos to whoever arranged all of that. I thought it was neat. Very cool. Good stuff.
Okay. One more note that we probably should have made at the beginning of the episode. So while this is a Universes Beyond set, and it does very much feel like a set that should be straight to Modern, or a Commander, it's like a Commander Horizons 1.
Yeah.
This is a standard legal set.
Yep.
Okay, so all of these cards are becoming standard legal. However, in packs, there are these cards through the ages, okay, which are Final Fantasy themed reprints of previous cards. I want to highlight the fact that these special through the ages cards are not considered standard legal unless their last non-through the ages reprint was in a standard legal set. So like, these are little bonus extras that you might be able to play in Pioneer or Modern, definitely Legacy, Vintage, Commander, but they are not necessarily standard legal.
So masterpieces.
If you do, what's that?
Masterpieces.
Yes.
Yeah, special guest masterpieces. Yeah.
Right. Just calling that out, because they are, they are art from various Final Fantasy cards. So you might think, I'm playing Final Fantasy, and this is this is a screen capture of a CGI cutscene from a video game, so it clearly must be standard legal. Yeah, just check, see what the actual card is, and see if that card is actually standard legal.
Can we just settle on some kind of branding that is uniformly used whenever this happens, instead of, changing the name every 3 or 4 sets or whatever it is that we're doing?
Can we decide? Yes, we can decide.
We're going to call it Masterpieces on the show from now on, I swear. That's what we're going to do. Or special guest. Either or is fine with me. I don't care. And we'll continue to use Unalive over and over again. But here's my fun story. Are you ready for this? This is great. Sure. So I was in a Dragonstorm draft last week. And I, drafted Teamer, which seems to be a trend for me. Well, actually, was that one? Teamer. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. So it was probably Teamer. And I packed
If it
one.
was 3 weeks ago, would it have been a different?
It might have been. It would have been still Teamer then.
Okay.
Very hard. Very.
I'm just curious. You're just
very much picking Teamer.
It must have been Teamer because it was 2 weeks ago.
Well, last week was
curious.
Boros. Last week was Boros.
Last week was Boros?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I pack one, picked one, Storm Scale Skyon. And for those unaware, it is 4 red, a 4/4 flying dragon with other dragons you control have +1/+1. And it has...
What's the name of the card?
Storm Scale Scion.
Okay, thank you.
I did say Skyon, didn't I?
I know. I was hoping for a porculus moment.
You were trying. You almost
I was hoping.
and it also has this intriguing little mechanic on it called Storm. So I get through round 1 and I don't see the card in my hand, or when I do get it, I can't play it before I die. It was a very sad round 1. Round 2, I'm playing against an old friend and a friend who listens to the show every once in a while and who's definitely in our Discord. And his name's Jackie, and I'm probably in game 2, and I've got a fair amount of mana in hand, and I've got the Storm Scale Scion in my hand, and I've got a green spell for 1 and a green, and I play it and do the effect, and it's like, go get a land or whatever it is. It's inconsequential. And then I look at them and I reach over to my pile of dice and I pick up a 6-sided die and I roll it to the 1 and I very deliberately plant it on the table and I look at him and I go, Storm at 1. And his eyes got so big. Doing Storm in limited and not in a master set is stupid, and it feels really good. Anyway, that's my little Storm story. I actually got to do Storm in limited. Pretty funny. How are we feeling about the set?
I mean, I'm not a Final Fantasy fan in general. I've just never had the chance to play it because I've never been on a PlayStation up until only a couple years back. But it looks fun. It looks like it has a lot of power into it, to Brian's words. It really kind of feels like a Modern Horizon set, but
I think most of it's available through Steam too. If you're curious.
In complexity.
Yeah, but it looks like a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are losing their minds over it. Like, my boss at work has no real idea about Magic. Like, she's a bit of a nerd, but like, she was asking me about the Final Fantasy set for Magic like months ago because she is such a huge Final Fantasy fan, and like, legitimately was like, oh, I might get into Magic because of this set. So like, job well done.
Yeah. Brian?
I think the set's obnoxious. I mean, it's obnoxious. That's my opinion. I mean, the cards individually. I think
we're going to be able to cut that. We're going to be able to cut that soundbite, and we're going to be able to use it for Spider-Man.
Just about everything.
We're going to be able to use it for Avatar.
I think with Spider-Man, I think the art's going to be obnoxious. No, here's the thing. I think any one particular card, if you show it to me, that's fine. Okay, there's like 1 or 2 that I'm like, that's just straight up obnoxious. But for the most part, each individual card is fine. It's just when it's the sum total of all of the stuff, like the word count is just absurd.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of words. They need to calm down. They just, because they said like a little bit ago, they were like, it takes us a little while. We heard you. Card complexity is too much. We're gonna tone it down. It takes a little bit of time. We work like 2 years ahead, and then they were like, psych. These cards go to 11.
I will say, I assume this probably was a little more than the 2 years because of all the licensing and right stuff, but I don't know. I have no real insight into that.
That's just card names and art, man. You can down, add a mana here, remove a word there. Anyway,
yeah,
that's just my thoughts.
Part of the problem is integrating it into the universe too. So I don't know. I mean, you have to create these things and make them fit into the overall thing flavorfully in terms of the mechanics and what's happening. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I'm not down on it yet. The only thing I'm worried about is whether or not I'll be able to get 8 people together with me to draft. And that's what I want to do with it. So we'll see what happens. So
Might need to get a payday loan for that.
yeah. So with that, that's our episode. And you can join us next time as we talk about time limits in CEDH. Or not. But for Pete's sake, folks, 11 hours. 11 hours. What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with you? 11 hours finals for one finals. What? All right, look, we won't talk about this because no one has time for that. I don't have the 11 hours to talk about it. We'll find something worth your time, though. So join us next week. Same bat time. Well, in 2 weeks. Same bat channel. And we'll talk about something interesting and fun and lighthearted and not an 11-hour CEDH final. Until then, you can send us an email at judgecast@gmail.com or like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at JudgeCast and on BlueSky at judgecast.bsky.social and check out any of our social media for invite links to our Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't spend a moment plugging our newest venture. We're now on YouTube. Come find us at JudgeCast for level 1 training modules, as well as new and past shows as soon as they are added. Check out our show notes for links, and remember, like, subscribe, and ring that bell. I'm Charles Feather, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
I'm Bryan Prilliman, and I like Freya and Lulu and Tara and Tifa, and as I continue, you know they're getting sweeter. That's right, it's Black Waltz number 5.
I have no idea what this is, but I have to go find it
Oh
now.
my god, that was amazing. Did you have that in your pocket from like the second? Wow.
I sat here and was just like, when I did Black Waltz number 3, I was like, I need to do a thing.
I didn't even think about it. Mambo number 5 into Black Waltz number 3. I freaking love it.